What's that? Hello guys, welcome back to another build with GoeFPV. In today's episode we will build, as you see, a Chimera 7 Pro. Let's clean up this table and start it. Alright, so here I have the frame. It's set for an year in my workshop and this is the time when we are gonna do something with it. Now let's start first by assembling this frame because we have to start building on something. And I will quickly put this frame together. I will not get into much details with these things that are not that important. I think the fun is to figure it out yourself, how to put it together. There are just some screws and some plates and everything will come together like a puzzle. Okay, so here is the frame all put together. The next thing is pre-installing actually the motors, and for the motors I will use this beautiful Maps King, which by the way they sponsored me, and if you want to see the review with these motors you can watch it on my channel. I will put it right here in the corner. These are pretty interesting motors, providing some nice features and they really work well, and I can say that before testing them because I already built a 5-inch drone. You can watch that build as well, and these neon motors from Maps are working great. So enough with the talking, let's put these motors onto the frame, and that's very easy. They have 4 screws that are being assembled here on the frame like this, and I will get through this protective cover the wires, and we will trim the wires later. But now let's install the motors. I first insert the wires into these protective plastics. And with this guard the screws might be too short, so luckily I have this box with M3 screws. To be honest, this saved me every build, so I recommend you buying an M3 screw set. You have some hardware here, some stack nuts, some XT60 connectors. This, by the way, is the Flywoo M3 screw set. They also have an M2 screw set, but to be honest, I don't know from where you can buy it right now. Alright, so now let me put some Loctite. And that's it. Now the Loctite is set on all the screws and I will start putting this motor together. Now all 4 motors are installed. A lot of wires here. It's a big mess, but we have to clean this up. So for now I will put these wires aside to make room for the stack. And here comes the interesting part. For the stack I also have the Maps King SZ60A Map Space ESC and the Maps King flight controller with an F7, which I reviewed, and the video of the review will be available here in the corner if you want to see. Also there is a link in the description if you want to buy this stack and these parts that I used in building this drone. And I will start initially with the ESC. First thing is to install the grommets so that I can insert them onto the stack screws, and I will do it for the others the same way. And now I will place it onto the stack screws, which are longer. First is the ESC with the battery pads on the back side, so in the rear of the drone. This is not a rule, but it's important. I just want to see how everything comes together. Check that there is enough space here under the ESC and looks fine to me. First thing is to install the capacitor and the battery plug. and I will use my third hand for all these soldering operations. As I said, first start with the capacitor. I will insert it from underneath. The white strip indicates the negative terminal of the capacitor. If you don't connect it on the right way, it will explode when you connect the LiPo. So I will just put a little bit of solder on the positive terminal because it takes heat easier, and then I will start to work it out. The negative terminal will work very hard because the entire PCB is almost all copper, so it will take a lot of heat. Alright, so finally I've succeeded. For cleaning I use isopropylic alcohol, this specific brand that I found locally. You will get rid of all the flux, and then all the solder will come out clean, and it looks fantastic. Here I forgot to add solder there, but it's enough for the capacitor to do the job. And now we need to continue with the motor wires. And now I will take these wires from the inside out like this, and then route them on this side, something like this. So I will do this for all the motors and trim the wires right here. I will leave room for some error and also strip them away. Now the wires are stripped, pre-tinning the wires, pre-tinning the ESC, and I will solder them together. Alright, so here are the motors just installed. I will make sure that everything comes nicely. Let's double check the solders. Quick cleanup of the soldering joints, and the next step will be to prepare the flight controller with the grommets. This looks amazing. Very nice. Next thing, as I said, the flight controller. For the grommets, the same thing I've done at the build with the 5-inch drone. I will use some extra grommets between the ESC and the flight controller, but some smaller ones, something like this, because I want to make enough space between both of them. This will provide good cooling and also a lot of clearance to make sure nothing shorts out or nothing gets jammed. Like this. And the clearance is not bad. I will only solder on top of the flight controller the camera, the VTX and the receiver, and also the GPS, of course, because it is a long-range drone. Now what I like to do is first to solder this VTX switch. And now, technically speaking, I have a switchable voltage regulator for the VTX. Now, speaking of VTX, I will install it here on the bottom. 4 screws. There is no Loctite, so I will add some, just a little bit, and I will screw down the VTX. Alright, so I hard mounted the VTX, and now I will remove the connector from it because it will be easily for me to solder these wires. And I checked the wiring diagram. I marked down all the pads that I need to use for the peripherals. So I will start by tinning all the pads that are going to be used, and I will first solder the VTX cable, each wire to its assignated pad, and after this I will finish by twisting the cable so that it will be more resilient to interferences and also allow me to keep the space a little bit more organized. And the next is the receiver, which also needs some preparation. I will first pre-tin the pads for the power and also for the UART, the TX and the RX, and I will solder the wires onto the receiver. Before covering it with the heat shrink, I will clean up the soldering joints and also connect the antenna, and then I will cut the heat shrink to the correct size and shrink it using a heat gun, or also a lighter will work. And now it's time to connect it also to the flight controller. Same thing, connect each wire into the correct position and give a twist to the cable. And following the same procedure, I soldered the camera wires, which doesn't have a communication wire in my case. And now we can say we've put together almost everything that we are required to install here in order to have a working FPV drone. But here comes the important thing in flying a long-range FPV drone, and that's having a GPS on the drone and also a buzzer that is externally powered by a separate battery, and this one will start buzzing whenever the battery will get disconnected in case you lose your drone. Now for the GPS, I already pre-installed it here in the back of the drone. I have this TPU printed mount which holds the receiver antenna and also the GPS. The GPS comes with a connector and also this wire, which will help me to connect it to the flight controller, and for that I already have these pads pre-tinned with solder. So let's start soldering it. I wasn't able to find the wiring diagram of this GPS, but it comes pre-labeled on its case, so I know which wire goes where on the flight controller. Alright, so the GPS is installed. The next part is the buzzer. And the buzzer has a great position right here in the front because the camera is actually shifted a little bit forward. So I have the right place to install the buzzer right here. But before that, let's solder this cable, which is already pre-tinned, onto the pads right here, ground and 5 volts. The power will supply voltage to this buzzer. This lithium polymer battery, this very small battery, will be charged when you are flying, and whenever it's the case, it will use the external power to buzz, hoping you will recover your drone. And now let's connect this buzzer to the flight controller through these power wires and also the buzzer command, and after this I will give it a quick twist to the cable to have it the same like the others. Okay, so luckily the buzzer comes with a double-sided tape right here, and I will use this tape to secure it here in the front. Alright, so I think it's secure. Before putting everything together, I would recommend you to use some kind of conformal coating to cover both sides of the flight controller. But before doing this, let's make sure one more time that we have everything cleaned up. Alright guys, so after a lot of struggle to fit everything together, I finished installing the frame and everything. Now the only thing I have to do before starting to configure it in the beta flight, I need to check if I don't have any short circuit around, and I'm doing that using a multimeter. So I will turn this on and put it into the diode mode so that it beeps whenever there is a contact, like that. Because it has a capacitor, it might beep when I touch it for the first time, but then it shouldn't beep anymore. So let's see. It says open line, so it doesn't seem to be any problem. Let's see between the plus and the frame, nothing. And what I would do, I would try to see if there is any short circuit here on the board between ground and plus. Nothing. That's good. And I also configured the drone in beta flight and connected it to the transmitter, and now it's time to get it to the flight. For this particular test flight, I'm not gonna use a long-range battery, and I will use the 6S with 1300 milliamps, and that will do the job for just a few minutes of flight so that we can see how it behaves. So let's connect it, turn on the controller and the goggles, and we will take off. So I really like how this drone flew, but I need to say that it really requires some more tune to fly smooth. I feel some jittering and some struggling to keep up in tight corners, but it flies really well and I feel the power that this motor provides, and the power is really good. I don't know about the efficiency yet, I didn't test it yet in a long range flight, but that's maybe for another video. So please subscribe to my channel, like this video if you enjoyed it, and see you in the next one. Bye!